Magic, we think of it as entertainment. But what if ancient Egyptians had actually created the world's first comprehensive healthcare and security system? The Nisaba text reveals something far more practical than pulling rabbits from hats.
That's fascinating, how these weren't just random spells, but more like an ancient survival manual. How exactly did they organize such a complex system?
Well, think of it like this. They created what we might call a supernatural encyclopedia, organized by practical needs rather than gods or myths. If you had a scorpion bite, you'd flip to the dangerous creatures section, not wade through religious ceremonies to find help.
So you're telling me they essentially had an ancient version of WebMD, but with actual step-by-step solutions?
Exactly. And here's what's really mind-blowing. These weren't vague instructions. Each spell required specific ingredients gathered at precise times, particular amulets, and exact words. It was like following a doctor's prescription, but with a magical twist.
That makes me wonder about the success rate of these treatments. Did they keep track of what worked?
You know, that's one of the most interesting aspects. They actually refined these spells over generations. The texts show evolution from the Middle Kingdom onwards, with modifications based on what proved effective. Think of it as ancient clinical trials.
The way you describe it makes it sound more like a scientific approach than what we typically think of as magic.
Oh man, wait until you hear about ISIS. She's basically their equivalent of a chief medical officer. There's this incredible story where she uses magic to save her son Horus from poison, and that became the template for healing spells. People would literally channel her energy when treating similar conditions.
Well, that really puts modern medicine in perspective. We still use the caduceus as a medical symbol today.
And speaking of symbols, the physical components were incredibly specific. You couldn't just grab any old herb. It had to be gathered at dawn from a specific location during certain astronomical conditions. Every detail mattered.
That level of precision must have required extensive training. How did they pass on all this knowledge?
These texts were essentially medical school textbooks. Practitioners had to memorize not just the words, but all the associated actions, materials, and timing. Imagine being a doctor who also needs to know astronomy, botany, and theology.
The complexity of this system is remarkable. It really challenges our modern assumptions about ancient practices.
And here's what really gets me. They didn't separate physical healing from spiritual intervention. If you had a headache, you might receive a herbal remedy while the practitioner recited spells to drive out evil spirits. It was holistic medicine before we even had that term.
That's quite different from our compartmentalized approach to healthcare today.
Well, consider this. When we're sick today, we might see a doctor for medicine, a therapist for emotional support, and maybe seek spiritual guidance from religious leaders. They had all of that wrapped into one comprehensive system.
So in some ways, they were actually ahead of us in terms of treating the whole person, rather than just symptoms.
Exactly. And the emotional component was huge. These weren't just dry technical manuals. They were filled with passionate pleas to the gods, vivid descriptions, and powerful assertions. It was like combining a prescription with a pep talk and a prayer.
The psychological impact of such an approach must have been significant.
You know what's really wild? They believed words themselves had physical power. When they said, "I speak with the voice of Re," they weren't being metaphorical. They believed they were temporarily channeling divine authority to reshape reality.
That's quite a responsibility for the practitioners.
And that brings us to perhaps the most important point. This wasn't just about treating illness or solving problems. It was about maintaining harmony between the physical and spiritual worlds. Every spell, Every ritual was part of keeping that balance.
Well, that really puts our modern healthcare debates in perspective, doesn't it?
Indeed, it does. Whether it's ancient spells or modern medicine, we're all still trying to figure out the best ways to take care of ourselves and each other. The methods change, but the fundamental human needs remain the same.